battle for Champions League places are absolutely insane right now. It is so competitive and so squashed together. So in this video, I'm going to go through each contender for those Champions League spots. I'm going to talk about their strengths, their weaknesses, their fixtures, and at the end of the video, I will reveal who I believe will make it into those crucial Champions League spots. So at the moment, I think Liverpool and Arsenal you would expect to get themselves into those Champions League spaces pretty comfortably. But then from third spot, Nottingham Forest, who have been an absolutely outstanding story this season with 51 points, all the way down to 10th spot with Fulham with 42 points. When you're thinking about the 5th spot, which looks like it could be a Champions League spot for an English team this year, it is so tight and so up for grabs. Massive apologies to Brentford and Crystal Palace, but this video would have been an hour long if we put you both in, and I just feel like you're maybe just out of it at this stage. Prove me wrong. Prove me this barista-looking, coffee shop possibly owning dude. I just decided to wear a hat and I've now realised what I look like. So let's live in a world where 5th spot isn't available. And if you want to get in 4th spot, how many points do you need? Over the last few years, 63, 67, 70, 68, and 67 have got you to that promised land of 4th spot. But with it being so competitive, I'm intrigued to do my workings out on who I think will win how many games and how many points they will get to see what will be the magic number this time. If you've got a magic number in mind, let me know in the comments down below. Right, let's start off with the team in 3rd spot. These are the fixtures that they have left this season. We're going to come back to those fixtures because I think they're very prominent when it comes to Nottingham Forest. But it's been an outstanding season for them. And the sort of ripening of this squad and the players within this squad going from also rans or rejects to being outstanding players for this Nottingham Forest side and a team that you can be excited about for years to come has been one of the stories of the season. But can they get over the line? Well, they've just beaten Manchester City and they limited Man City to 0.86 XG. They also drew with Arsenal recently, but they've only won 2 of their last 5 Premier League games. But one win was against Manchester City, which I don't know how big is that these days. And the other was a 7-0 win against Brighton. So this is a really unpredictable Nottingham Forest team. Maybe not over the course of the season, but in this recent pocket. So what is the reason why they will get into the top 4? Well, they've got the 3rd best home record in the league. They've only lost twice at home all season long. And that is going to be something that they're going to want to lean on. We'll come back to that because I think that's crucial here. What's the reason why they won't get top 4? I think, first of all, the pressure of it, what we do see a lot of the time with these teams that go on this magical run is that they do fall away. Now, Forest are not a million miles away from getting, we're 10 games away, but that is still 10 games. And we've seen teams fall away from this point regularly. And the games are going to come thick and fast. And the pressure is going to be, anything but a win is just not good enough for them. And that's a pressure that this group's going to have to deal with. Can they deal with it? I think they actually can. And I don't think they're going to concede too many. But they can sometimes struggle to control a game for 90 minutes. Or they're certainly controlling it in a very different way. If you think about their lack of need of the ball because they want to get the ball and work in transition, work quickly, use the pace that they've got, be direct. Recently they conceded 4 in the first half against Newcastle. But they did dominate the second half. So as I say, they are unpredictable, but they do lack some control. The fixtures is where I think it's going to be absolutely crucial for Nottingham Forest, which obviously is an obvious point. But in terms of the games that they've got quite a nice run in. Ipswich, obviously one of those teams down the bottom, struggling at the moment, so they would imagine that they've got a real chance of winning that one. Man United at home is crucial here. Villa, Everton at home, Brentford at home, Leicester at home. All really, really winnable games, and a lot of teams there that by the end of it, and this can be spun both ways, it could be one where there's a freedom there, or it could be one where they just don't have that same chutzpah to get the win. It could be useful playing a Tottenham team that is just focusing on the Europa League or otherwise is just got nothing to play for. Same with Everton. Could be the same with Villa in a few weeks, who knows? This could be the same for Palace, who obviously are always dangerous near the end of the season. They have been the last 2 years. West Ham as well. Teams that don't have much to play for. Is that a positive or a negative? Let me know, Forest fans. How are you feeling about that? Right, let's talk Chelsea. Chelsea 49 points at the time of recording. And their fixtures, they've got Arsenal, Tottenham, Brentford, then Ipswich, Fulham, Everton, Liverpool at home, and Newcastle away, and then Man United at home, and then Forest away. They are some very, very difficult fixtures. In terms of form, from the stats, I think that main man in Cole Palmer, if you think about how devastating he has been over the last year, that has fallen away somewhat. He is without a goal in his last 9 games in all competitions. Enzo Fernandez is back in amongst the goals with 4 goal involvements in his last 4 games in all competitions, so he's kind of taken it from him a little bit, but they only created 1 big chance against Leicester. They only beat Copenhagen recently 2-1, meaning that they probably can't rest as many players as they'd like for that second leg. And that's worth keeping in mind as the Conference League develops. How much is that going to change in terms of tiring out some of these players, whereas you've just been leaving them to the wayside? They haven't beaten a top half Premier League team since the 1st of December. And now, when we look at those fixtures for them, the amount of games that they've got to play against those teams in the top half, that is a huge, huge problem for them. And also, things like Brentford, you might go, that's a mid-table game. But Brentford, that's a West London derby. That is not a game you want to be playing when you need to be winning games, especially at Brentford. Arsenal away, Tottenham at home. These are huge games for the opposition, which I always think is a huge part of it when it comes to the run-in, because some teams will just, it's that 5%. It will make a massive difference. Fulham in there as well as another West London derby. That's a real problem for them. And therefore, having that record and that fixture list is a problem. Let's talk about the reason why they will get in the top 4. On paper, they arguably have one of the best squads of the teams in the run-in. And they've been in those positions for a lot of this season. The reason that they won't is that without Cole Palmer firing, I think it takes a lot away from the team's output. They've been labelled as quite passive recently, and there's not been much urgency. The fan base is somewhat disgruntled, if you compare them to some of the other teams in this list, like a Bournemouth, a Brighton, a Nottingham Forest. They are excited, and whereas this Chelsea team, there's a different kind of pressure on them. Will they stand up and thrive to that? It's going to be interesting to see. Another team that struggled, Manchester City, 47 points at the moment. Their games are a bit all over the place, really. You've got Brighton, Leicester, Man United, Palace. A lot of Man United and Palace. Keep an eye out for them. And Leicester as well, actually. Everton and Villa as well. And we'll get to Villa. Wolves, Southampton, Bournemouth and Fulham. In terms of form, it's been weird, hasn't it? Look, they had 69% possession against Forest, but did absolutely nothing. Have a look at the momentum bar. You can see it shows that they just didn't have that in them. And that has been the problem for them all season long. Mamouche was on the bench against Forest. They created 4 big chances against Tottenham and Newcastle, which is strong, it's solid. And look, you've got quality in that squad, haven't you? KDB has created the most big chances for City, but he's only started 12 games. And I think the reason for that is that you've got a guy who's a bit of a talisman for you. But with the athleticism of this league, I think Pep's a little bit concerned to use him at times because he's worried about, in transition, if you're going to play him in that midfield. Let's talk about the reasons why they'll get top 4. Well, the fixtures, I think, they aren't that bad. They've also got, we know they've got the quality there. We do know that. And they can sort of pinch a win if they need to, or they've got the quality to give that to them. They've got the experience of a run-in and being great in run-ins. If you think of that Spurs game, the 1-0 win, and that Haaland goal is a good example of that. And when it comes to those fixtures, look, any of these teams at home, you would expect them to, but Brighton have done them this year. Man United have done them this year. Palace is a harder game than people might wonder. Also a real bogey team for Man City as well. Villa, in terms of a team that can break with real pace, another real danger for them. The last 4 games, if they're in there and in those 5 spots, you would imagine they should be able to navigate. Wolves, Southampton, Bournemouth maybe could be a real ding-dong affair, and maybe Fulham away could be tricky as well. It's hard. It's very, very hard for them because you can't trust Man City right now. So I think it's a lot harder than people will imagine when they look at it on paper for a Man City team that has really cracked this year. And the bottom line is, despite the team you see on paper for Man City, will those players in those central areas be able to create enough chances for Man City to get them over the line this year? Because that's what it's about. Pep said it himself. It's a disaster if they don't get in the Champions League. Newcastle United next up. Interesting fixtures for them as well. Brentford, Leicester, Man United, Palace, Villa. Those teams we're talking about again. Ipswich involved, Brighton away. And then a really tough couple of games with Chelsea and Arsenal, and then finishing with Everton. Now, they had a great run of form in December, early January, winning 6 games in a row. But since then, they haven't won back-to-back Premier League games. And when it is as competitive as it is here, that's a problem. Because you need to go on a run here. But they're saying that their fixtures have been tricky. They've played Man City, they played Forest, and then Liverpool, all in February. Isak is still one of the best strikers, if not the best striker in the league. Up for the debate in the comments. I don't want to get involved. And he scored 7 in his last 9 in all competitions. So you've got a striker there who can get you a goal. Jacob Murphy, I think, has actually been a real positive that people haven't spoken about maybe enough. He scored against Forest recently and currently has 13 goals and assists this season. Let's talk about the reasons why they might get in the top 4. I think they've got characters in that team. I think they've got leaders in that team. And I think they do have the ability to go on a run. I think the thing that's been really frustrating for Newcastle fans is that you've seen some of these great performances and you go, that is what this team is. And then you just see a dud performance. I think of the Brentford game, which was actually a bit of a catalyst for them. Or the 4-0 defeat to Man City. I know it's Man City, but I think you would have thought that Newcastle had a chance in that game. And so it's getting that consistency level. I think the League Cup's going to be interesting in this as well. But playing Tonali as 6 and allowing Guimaraes to play as an 8 and really allowing him to just get on, take authority on matches from a creative perspective could be really, really important because he's not someone who's going to wane in terms of energy or desire. Scored the winner against West Ham this week. He's a cracking player for them. And as I say, that there's a team of leaders there that want to go and affect the game. And there's a nice passion about them as well. The reason that they won't get in the top 4 is that their last 3 games of the season, I think, are really tricky. I mean, that if they don't pick up the points over the next few game weeks, I think it could be tough for them, especially if they have a bit of a League Cup hangover. I think that is actually an interesting part of this, is does a victory create a launch pad for them to go and get into the Champions League with this new vigour and belief? And a defeat, and it's a second League Cup final defeat in 3 years, is that something that will really sort of take away the wind out of their sails? And because, as I say, I'm going to keep looking at it, it is so congested in there, and they've got some massive, massive games. But the next 5 fixtures, they start to go on a run, they've got a real shot. Next up, Brighton, and the fixtures are pretty punchy. But the form is really, really strong for Brighton. They've won 5 matches in a row in all competitions. We've done a video on the Premier League channel if you want to go and check that out, talking about the clever little lob chip pass tactic that they're utilising really, really well. The aggregate score in those last 5 in all competitions is 13-3. And I think this is really important, 13 different goal scorers this season as well. So they're doing well despite quite a lot of injuries. And I think the tweaks that they've been able to make have been really impressive. And the depth of the squad is unreal, to be honest, and something that I don't think people talk about enough. They can create a lot of chances. They created a total of 25 big chances in their last 5 matches. To be fair, 10 of them were against Southampton. But it's a really creative team. And it's a team that takes players on, that commits bodies forward, that plays forward passes, that pops it about. It's really nice. They created 5 big chances against Bournemouth and Chelsea. So, competitors. So let's talk about the reason why they might get top 4. I think the adaptiveness of Hörsler to make those tweaks that he's done all season without making massive changes to the principles of the approach, I think is huge. I think in Rutter, you've got Welbeck, you've got, a Dingra, you've got Minte, you've got Matoma, you've got so much going for you going forward. So if you need to get yourself a goal, they've got that in them. And I like Hörsler. I think he's young and bullish and unafraid. And I think he's imposing that on this squad, and they're feeling the exact same way. The FA Cup is going to be interesting for a few of these teams. Like, the further they go in that, will they just go, do you know what? Let's just focus on the FA Cup here because we've got a chance here. Will one eye be taken off? That is something that I wonder. And I think Brighton have got Nottingham Forest coming up. So for both teams, that could be interesting. But Forest are so far in it that they might just go, no, come on, let's make sure we get this Champions League. But Brian, they're so close right now. It's there, they can taste it. And they got Man City this weekend as well. What about a reason for why they won't get top four? Well, not many of the players in the squad have been in this scenario before. And it's interesting to see how they cope when every single game matters for the rest of the season. Put that together with an awkward fixture list for me. Man City, obviously we're about to see what happens there, but Villa is tough. Palace away is really difficult, of course, because it's a derby game. Leicester, Brentford, these are all games they can absolutely win, but they're all games that you could see them drawing. And I think that might be my fear here, is that do they concede one or two too many, and the games are a little bit too tight and they don't go their way. A tough end as well with Liverpool and Tottenham at the end there. It's going to be interesting to see how I settle when I put my predictions together with Brighton, because they might be right up there. One must beware Aston Villa. We'll get to their fixtures in a second, because there's something... They're not easy, but they're tasty. Aston Villa have a really good squad. I think they've had the best January of anyone. What we've got to say is that the form's gone under the radar somewhat, and it's been poor, right? They've won 2 Premier League games out of the last 8. Obviously, they're still in the Champions League. They're still in the FA Cup, which both takes its toll, but also kind of rejuvenates the sort of feeling amongst the fans and the team, because you're winning games. You're making your way into the next round of things. So that's strong. Asensio's come in, Rashford have come in. These are all nice little sort of bright notes that have allowed that form to kind of go under the radar. He was not, Asensio, by the way, is not in the squad for the Brentford game, but he is reportedly back and fit now. Scored 5 goals since signing for Villa, and he's forming really nice relationships with different players. We've got a whole video about his relationship with Rashford, so make sure you go check that out when you get a chance, because it is interesting, the two of them working together. And just really clever from Unai Emery. Ollie Watkins is back in scoring form as well. Is it just because it's Brentford and he always scores against them? Not totally sure, but he does have a total of 8 goal involvements, 4 goals, 4 assists in his last 9 in all competitions. Ollie Watkins is back in scoring form as well. Back in scoring form as well. And if Watkins gets injured, I guess the good thing you've got is you've got Rashford knocking about, you've got Marlon knocking about, you've got Asensio knocking about. So that does help. Those January signings and that partnership with Asensio and Rashford, or with Asensio and the players around him, even Asensio with Morgan Rogers, has been really, really nice to see. Let's talk about why they won't get in top 4. Does it make more sense for them to be prioritising this season's Champions League and the FA Cup, given that they can win a trophy here in those 2 competitions? They've got a real chance. The FA Cup doesn't have those big 6 normal teams. Now, are they as good as they've been in previous years? That's by the by. But to not have Liverpool in there, to not have Arsenal in there, and we'll see what happens with Man City, but not have Chelsea in there, that gives Aston Villa a huge opportunity of winning a trophy this season. And so they will be concentrating on those. I do think they have the depth overall. The final thing is the fixtures. Because if you think of the competitors around them, right? Coming up for Aston Villa, they have Brighton knocking about them, could do the old leap. Forest could drag them towards them. Newcastle could leapfrog them. Man City, by this point, if you get yourself on a bit of a run, and hopefully you're beating Southampton, Man City game becomes absolutely enormous. Fulham, by this point, are they still in the running? We'll get to that. Bournemouth, again, you don't know where they're going to be at that point. It could be a tasty, tough, tricky game. And then Tottenham and Man United are always tough games, regardless of where they are in the league, because they're big games. So it's an awkward one, but there's huge opportunity there to go and sort of bump your competitors on the nose. Bournemouth in 9th spot have a proper chance of making the Champions League, getting into that 5th spot, at the very least getting European football this year, and they've got to keep going. They are without a Premier League win in the last 3 games. However, they've created a total of 8 big chances in these games, and they've only scored 3 goals. And they've had really bad injuries, and how they've kept winning and staying in this is absolutely kind of beyond me, because of, You just don't expect to lose that many players and still be able to, lose both your strikers and still just get the job done. Beat Newcastle 4-1. They still got a few players out, but Evan-Nielsen is back from injury, scored back-to-back games for them. They have an absolutely huge game against Manchester City in the FA Cup coming up as well. They've got to stay on this positive train. They've created the third most XG in the league this season. Why they do that? We've got a video on that as well. By this point, we've done a video on most things, but go check that one out as well. And they've made the second most interceptions in the league this season with 280. Also, they've actually been a bit unlucky. They've hit the post. Actually, that's a question for the comments. Is it unlucky or not? But they've hit the post more than any other team with 18. And they've scored the third most fast break goals. Can they keep this energy up? Let's talk about the reason why they could get into the top 4. They have multiple players capable of offering you a moment of quality when you need it to create goals. And also, the thing I love about them is just the hybrid nature of this forward line and players that can play and interact and change and fill in for different players if you do have those injuries. So that's a huge thing. The fact that Kluivert can give you a moment, Tavernier can give you a moment, Christie can give you a moment, so many players can give you a moment. That is huge for them in terms of winning games. What's the reason why they won't get top 4? I think one, the fact that they are exceeding expectations broadly of Bournemouth as a football club, I think is a fair thing to say. So will that mean that they kind of allow themselves, they're maybe almost a bit too kind to themselves and go, oh, well, it's not working out, it's getting a bit tough now. And then they sort of slowly retreat in terms of their form. Time will tell. Also, I think the fixtures towards the back end of the season are concerning. And you also wonder, they sprint so much, Bournemouth. The intensity with which they operate. Is there a potential for burnout at some point from this team that has just worked wonders for them? And I know their fan base are absolutely thrilled with them. What I would say is that up to the last 3 games of the season, Brentford, Ipswich, West Ham, Fulham, Palace, Man United, what a huge opportunity to win the bulk of those games. And then you get to the last 3 and you see what happens. You have 3 cup finals in Arsenal, Villa and Man City. But they've beaten Man City already this season and they've beaten Arsenal this season. So why not? And last but certainly not least, Fulham. Let's have a look at their form first and then we'll talk about the fixtures because there's 5 games that are crucial there. 5 out of their last 7 games have been by a scoreline of 2-1, which is just confusing really. They've got the 7th best away record, but only the 11th best home record. Screams mid-table overall, even though we know they're a really fun team. They've conceded the 3rd least expected goals this season, though. Really, really strong defence that they don't get enough credit for, I don't think. They created 4 big chances against Wolves recently. They haven't had back-to-back wins, though, in the Premier League since November, which I think, again, is worrying when you're at the bottom of this pack and you're going to need to really go for a run. A proper run as well. So what's the reason why they could get top 4 or top 5? Their defence is, as I say, so much better than people give them credit for. And the shutouts could come. Why won't they do it? I think maybe there's too many teams between them. There's too much competition around them. They've got to be a bit too perfect. And maybe the gap may be too big considering how inconsistent they have been in 2025 and those remaining fixtures. When we get to those fixtures, I think that's an interesting point here because Tottenham, Arsenal, Liverpool, Bournemouth, Chelsea, that's tough. But if they are still in the hunt for Europe, Southampton, Villa, Everton, Brentford, Man City, that gives them a real shot. I can't see Fulham. I'm struggling to see Fulham make their way into it because of those 5 games where really you probably need to win 3 of them to still be in the race. Right, so I've done my predictions. I've gone through every single game that these contenders have, and these are my final points tallies for each team in order. Now, I'm going to contradict myself at times when it comes to the fixtures, but these are just my gut calls on each fixture, be it home or away, or how the 2 teams match up. So in 10th spot, it's going to be Fulham. They're going to get 11 points between now and the end of the season, finishing on 53 points. I think those fixtures right at the start of it all will probably take the wind out of their sails a little bit. And overall, I've got them getting the least amount of points out of any of the contenders for the Champions League spots. In 9th spot, I've got Aston Villa. The reason for it is I think the Champions League and the FA Cup could be distractions to a point, put a certain amount of strain on the squad, but also those fixtures are so tough. And so I've got them getting 15 points between now and the end of the season, picking up wins, but with so many contenders in and around them, I think there'll be a few too many draws for them. Just 1 point ahead of them, I think it could be Brighton. They'll also get 15 points, but they'll finish on 61 points to the 60 points for Aston Villa. It's draws. There's going to be a lot of draws here for me when it comes to Brighton, and I think that's what's going to hurt them when it comes to it. And it's games that actually any game you can see them winning, but any game you can see them drawing. And that's why I can't get them up into that Champions League spots. But they could absolutely catch fire, as any team could in this. Ready for a shock? Here we go. In 7th spot, with 65 points by the end of this Premier League season, according to my predictions. And just 16 points, well, more than the other guys, but 16 points in the run-in, I've got Chelsea. I think their fixtures are the hardest by quite some distance because of the context of those games. Derby games away from home as well. Add into that Tottenham, Arsenal, even a Man United game, the profile goes up a notch, and I think that makes life very difficult for them, and I think they'll finish in 7th. 6th, and we're in for another shock here. I have Manchester City getting 19 points in this run-in and finishing on 66 points. Now, as we get into the sun comes out, they might start popping it about and looking great. And this could be an awful take. But right now, the way I'm feeling, the lack of creativity at times, the lack of athleticism at times, I just wonder if it will change enough. I think teams smell blood, and I think because of that, they won't get the points that they need. So if 5th spot gets the Champions League, this team will get in the Champions League and it will be outrageous. If not, they will obviously just miss out, but they'll get European places. I've got Bournemouth going on an outrageous run. Maybe I'm desperate for it to happen, but I've got them getting a total of 22 points. I feel like they could catch a bit of a wave here and overpower some of the teams and finish on 68 points. It's rogue, but it. I thought, let's go for it. And in my final 2 spots, in 3rd and 4th, first of all, I've got Newcastle United, who I think will get 21 points and finish on 68 points by the end of the season. The reason I've got that is because some of those tougher games are at home, and I see them picking up points there. I could see them going on a bit of a run, true focus on the league form, and I think they could get the job done. I think there's enough quality there if they can bring it together and start cooking. And in Isak, they've got a striker who can score goals for the team and get some real momentum going. And in 3rd spot, Nottingham Forest. I think they'll have a strong, steady run in between now and the end of the season. They'll get themselves 19 points, which will mean they'll finish on 70 points and will be in the Champions League. An outrageous achievement. Those are my predictions. What are your